Hey guys, welcome back to Remove Before Race. I'm your host Raz, and we've got something rather special here today. It is the brand new 992 Targa. Now, we've gone through the 992 series and looked at the entire history of the Porsche 911 with regards to the coupe, the cabriolet, Turbo S, some of the GT product as well. But with every variant of the 911, it comes with history as well. And the Targa is perhaps one of the most interesting ones because it's one that was created out of fear rather than necessity. So in this episode, we're going to go back and see why this car was first created, why it's managed to endure all this time, and explore this new model, which is the 992 Targa 4S. So guys, today's episode of RBR is once again sponsored by our great partners, The Last Coat. We've had them on the channel many times, and this time I've got a brand new product called Iron Off. As you can see, this one is specifically related to wheels, but as you can see, it can also be used on glass and other surfaces as well. Application is really easy. Just apply it on the surface of your alloy wheel like this, and then leave it for 2 to 5 minutes. And as Iron Off gets to work, it will turn into a purple-red color as it breaks down all the iron into soluble water. It's actually pretty scary what a difference it makes. After that, all you need to do is jet wash it off. Now guys, as you saw, I didn't do any cleaning on the wheel before I put Iron Off on, and just look at the finish. For the longest time I've been looking for a wheel cleaner that would actually get rid of all the crap on there. That's despite having cleaned it with soap before. This one, it's actually done an amazing job. Every time I think The Last Coat can't surprise me anymore, they go and do it again. So guys, the discount code is the same as it's always been, RBRTLC20. Link is down below. Go and get this stuff. It's gonna save so much headache. Now, back to the episode. So guys, arguably the most special and prettiest looking 911 is back here in 992 form. Now, I love the history of the 911, but the Targa one I found especially fascinating because, as I said, this was a car that was born out of fear of regulation rather than desire. So in the predecessor to the 911, the Porsche 356, the cabriolet variant was a really great seller, particularly in the USA. But when it came time for the 911 to get the same form, Porsche were fearing that the NHTSA of the USA, which is basically their road and traffic regulation body, were going to ban the sales of cabriolets altogether. So they came up with a different concept altogether, which they called Targa. Now, Targa in Italian means shield, and it also follows the Targa Florio races where Porsche were very successful in their racing history there. So what Porsche did was create a whole new body style with an exposed roll bar, which is essentially what the Targa is today as well. So we had this exposed steel-clad roll bar in the middle, and then we had a removable rear plastic window where the car ended up kind of looking like a basket handle design because you could remove that rear section in the past. Later on, the glass one became standard because the previous one wasn't that weatherproof. And of course, we had the middle section as removable as well. Now, this, of course, was a compromise in every way for Porsche at the time, but what were they to know historically that in the future, it was going to end up becoming a design icon. So that is how the Targa was born. That's why it came significantly before the cabriolet in the 911 series as well, and it was all thanks to the fear of cabriolets being banned in the USA. Then the next version came, and again, influence from the USA meant some added impact bumpers on the front. There was even some really hot Carrera versions of this car, which looked really quite nice, even with the decals on the side, but the best has to be the 930 Turbo. Yes, it makes no sense considering how much the car would probably flex, but how awesome does this thing look? After this, in the 993 generation, the Targa went a step backwards, in my opinion, and it ended up with a completely different look, which was essentially a panoramic sunroof with a sliding section. Now, that was fine, and it probably made sense in terms of modernity back then, but it looks too much like the coupe. It doesn't look as good as the coupe, and of course, it made the car that much heavier without having a distinctive looking design. Then we went to 996.2, where the car took a 4-year break before it came back. Again, a similar application in this, of course, better mechanics, weight saving, etc. But essentially looking like the coupe without its own distinctive look. 997, much of the same, a bit of UV protection, etc., but keeping the coupe look. I suppose the benefit of this is it did have the same roofline as the coupe, where the original Targa did not. But no, the savior came in the 991 generation, where Porsche reverted to the iconic and retro look of the first Targa. And that was done with an extremely complex two-part roof process that the 991 debuted, and it follows through into our 992 car today. Now let's take a look at the folding roof mechanism, which is absolutely awesome in the modern Targa. Luckily there's a button on the key which is specifically for Targa function, and as it opens you can see the rear glass part opens up completely, and then the soft part at the front begins to slide back as two latches in the roll bar release. Then it folds in a Z shape just behind the rear seat compartment, and then the glass door closes back again. It is so clever and so well done. That roof mechanism can be opened or closed within just 19 seconds, but it has to be done at a standstill versus the cabriolet, which you can do moving. You also get two different finish options, so you've got the standard steel look, or you've got a satin black metallic look, which is pretty incredible, and they're very proud of it because it can take a lot of wear and tear, and that took a lot of time for them to develop. And on this white spec, I think it looks particularly good against the silver Targa badge. Another very clever part of this system is if there's anything blocking the operation of that rear part, then the park assist function will tell you, it will stop the operation of the roof to stop the car from damaging itself and then close back, which is quite clever. Now, versus the cabriolet version, there is a weight penalty of 40 kg. Now, that is the price you have to pay to get one of the most special looking 911s in standard form. So we have to weigh that up against how it's going to drive later with that weight penalty. Now, performance doesn't seem all that different. We've still got 450 brake horsepower in the 4S, 530 Newton meters. We'll have to see, does this feel as rapid as our 4S coupe and cabriolet? Now, versus the coupe, you can see the roofline is very similar, but the Targa just looks so special, doesn't it? Whereas you can almost blink and miss the coupe. A very pretty looking car, this. Of course, the new 992 Targa comes with all the benefits of the new 992, like a almost completely aluminium outer shell other than the front and the rear, the wet mode, the new engine, all the active aerodynamics that were brought into the 992, and all of the options that you can get in coupe and cabriolet. Dynamically speaking, essentially you can get in this car. Our car today does not have the 10mm lowered suspension, so it'll be interesting to see versus our long-term 4S how that is, where it does have PDCC. So we'll get a really interesting mix of a dynamic car that's riding a little bit higher. Now let's have a look what those changes have done for the interior of the 992, and then see how this Targa 4S performs on the road with that little bit of extra weight. Has it affected it, or does it still drive brilliantly like the 992 coupe? I'm a big fan of the 992 interior, particularly how simplistic it is versus 991, which had loads of buttons, if you guys remember, in that center console. Do you remember? I'll try and remind you here. But one thing I really did like that car had was that extended gear stick, which you can then push to the other side and put into manual mode. That was just a really satisfying looking design, and it's been replaced with this, which is also nice because it kind of matches the key fob here that you turn, the fake one, and these buttons here and these lovely buttons at the front. So it's all kind of harmonious, but I just miss having that like substantial PDK gear stick. Oh well. In terms of Targa, what is really interesting is how there is no compromise for the occupant if you choose the Targa roof. And what I mean by that is, if we close this, as we said, it takes 19 seconds. The finish of the roof itself is completely identical, at least to a layman's eyes, to the coupe. It looks really substantial, really thick. There's nothing about this so-called soft top that is soft. It is just like the coupe. You look at the rear, and the rear roll bar underneath is finished in Alcantara. You appear to have essentially the same rear space, which in the 911 is not a lot. But generally, this looks and feels super substantial. It feels just like the coupe. I've got tons and tons of headroom that I normally wouldn't have in a sports car of this ilk, which is a great benefit of the 911, which is no surprise considering how tall Dr. Walliser is as well, so I'm sure he'd want a car that he can actually fit in. I really love how Porsche are unafraid to use fabric within their high-end cars because it really sets them apart. So you've got Nappa, perforated leather, and the fabric element within these seats. And it just looks great because no one else really delves in that in today's market. Of course, you have a welcoming screen that says Targa, you have your side sills that say Targa as well, but nothing too much that differentiates from the already brilliant interior of the 992. Two things I really like. I like the exhaust button here, which glows a lovely red, and the PDCC button as well. They're not in my 4S Coupe, and I really like the look of those. Now, one other undeniable benefit of having an open top 911, be that cabriolet or in this case Targa, is having access to the elements. And that's not just in terms of sunlight, etc., because for petrol heads, what's more important is getting exhaust sound. So, we're gonna have tons more emotion coming into the cabin, both when you're revving it like an idiot, and of course when you're driving it angrily, roof off, on some country roads, which we're gonna do right now. So guys, you should get very used to seeing left-hand drive cars in the UK as the whole COVID thing happens. It's going to become more and more a common experience, but not a displeasing one by any stretch of the imagination. It's actually quite fun. So today we're looking at Targa 4S and how does it differentiate essentially between the 4S Coupe that I'm a lot more used to driving as a long-termer. So we're in some pretty bumpy roads at the moment. I'm going to start with PDCC and the comfort side of things, and I'll shift the drive mode into normal as well. It does feel a little bit more comfortable. I always do find cars that are a little bit heavier, a little bit higher, this doesn't have the 10mm drop as we said, inevitably end up being just a little bit better along the bumps. And that's certainly the case, I think, here with the Targa 4S. And I'm quite used to driving the 4S Coupe, so I don't know whether it's a really small difference and only something you notice if you're driving them back to back like I am. What is undeniably glorious is having access to the elements, but it's quite weird because when I look behind me we've still got the fixed roll cage area, but it feels so similar to how the Turbo S Cabriolet felt to me in experience, and indeed if we stiffed it into sport mode now, getting some of the increased exhaust sound. You can hear the electronic wastegates opening and closing. It's a very pleasurable experience. Get some nice pops and bangs as well. Sound is so much of what I'm expecting from Targa, and you get so much of it from the sport exhaust. It's a definite option that you have to tick on any 992. It just gives you that much more excitement. It's got the rapid feeling and the butterflies that move around in your stomach, just like I experience in the coupe. The speed is mighty impressive, it really is. It really gives me the goosebumps that I get out of the coupe, but of course the whole experience is accelerated thanks to having the drop top element. I absolutely love this boxer engine. It's so quick to react. It gives a wonderful exhaust note. Yes, it's muted versus 991, but you still get some really nice sounds out of it. The 8-speed gearbox. You won't find a gearbox in the sports car category that is as fast as the 992's ones. It is really almost GT product fast in the gear changes. So pleasing because when your Halo cars have always been GT product with those lightning fast shifts, to have that in a standard Targa 4S as well is great, and it's just what you expect from a Porsche. I do feel there is more wind noise than I got in the Turbo S Cab, though I get as much exhaust noise, which is great, but in terms of actual buffering, there's a bit more going on inside. I don't think I was expecting coming into Targa. I somehow thought I would get less, but when you think about the shape of it, it kind of makes sense. Now, of course, so much of driving a 911 is all about the handling. The worry coming into Targa is, what is that difference going to be? And I can tell you, really on these type of roads, we're not at our studio today, just at standard country roads, and it's negligible in reality versus my coupe, which is of course a stage ahead of the cabriolet that you would normally compare this against. Really, I cannot discern anything versus coupe. Steering is brilliant, it's as accurate as it is in the coupe. I'm getting that same confidence driving faster and faster as I do in the standard 992. Really, I don't think you can look beyond that with the 4S Targa, because in normal daily driving, which is where this car is going to be used 90% of the time, it feels close enough to the coupe in all the best ways. The steering is great. There's not that much body roll going on. I'm not feeling the weight as much as I thought I would. 80 to 90% of that 992 experience survives in the Targa. Then you've got that lovely design on the outside. You've got all the exhaust sound that I would liken to my experience with the Turbo S cab, though not quite as loud. And when you want to, you can close the roof and still have an interior that's built just as well and feels just as substantial as the coupe one, and none of the road noise, as it's just as quiet as well. Really, for daily driving, I couldn't think why one would go for a normal 4S over the Targa. Obviously it costs more to get the Targa, but just look at it. With all the other retro cues that the 992 brought along anyway, it's only a massive benefit if you love the design of the 911 going back in its history. Whereas from 993 to 997 it became kind of, why would you buy a car? I kind of feel like, why wouldn't you buy it if you want to get like a standard 911 now? So guys, I hope you enjoyed that first drive and look at the history of the Targa series in the 911. If you did, please do like, subscribe and hit the bell icon. I've got just my drive back to Reading HQ left now, and I'm going to enjoy it to the max. See you next time.